If you clicked on this, you're either looking to launch or grow a successful podcast, and a lot of other people on the internet will claim to teach you how to do it. I'm not going to teach you how to do it. I'm going to teach you how it's done. When I say that, I mean I'm going to take a podcast that's already successful and reverse engineer how they did it. This is Wealth Warehouse. We've been producing this show for Dave and Paul for a little over 2 years now. They just hit 100,000 downloads, and they get 75% of their leads for their business from this podcast. So without further ado, let's get to the content. This is exactly how they grew this podcast to over 100,000 downloads. This is what I'm calling the road to 100K downloads. So what's the purpose? Why is 100,000 downloads important? It's really not. It's a milestone. It's important to them. Obviously, it's important to us because this is a podcast. This is our longest standing client ever, right? Shout out to Dave and Paul. They will be named. By the way, I did ask them if we could do this. They said it's totally fine. Some of this will be public as well. And there's a YouTube video that's attached to this that I'll show you guys by the end of this too. But really the thing is, it's important if it's important, right? But download numbers are a metric. Again, they're not the metric, but they're a metric. And also, just for context, before we get into this, Jack has done all of the episode management, all the production management, and all of the show notes. So Jack, feel free to chime in at any point. There will be some moments where you could definitely go off a little bit on that. But if you have certain questions about the production side or the back end, Jack will be your man for that as well. And the goal here, guys, is let's just apply something, right? I mean, that's kind of half of the LaunchPad is showing what is possible, and then is there something you can apply to your show, your client show, whether you're pre-launch or post-launch. And there's a lot of ideas there that we can kind of talk through. But it's really like, yeah, let's see what we can apply to our own show. This is not meant to copy and paste Wealth Warehouse's strategy. It's more so there's things that they did that, to be honest, I don't even know if they knew how well these things would work. And now we can just go see it. So it's full kind of 2020 vision. Just to run it back all the way to the beginning, guys, December 2021 is when I reached out to Dave, the host. I said, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing. He said, I'm interested in podcasting. And then boom, early 2022, we started off. This was one of the initial, kind of cover arts and logos here, which we kind of finessed to try to kind of make their vision a reality. And then this is the one we ended up settling on, just so you guys can see the before and after, just for a little bit of context. So I'll go a little bit deeper into the concept of it, but it's kind of beyond my knowledge as well. Less important here today. What really is important is, okay, what worked and what can we take away? So this is Wealth Warehouse. So quick summary too, just so you guys can see the actual results here. They just hit 100,000 downloads. The screenshot is today. They're doing, like I said, about 3,000 to 4,000 downloads a month, given the month. And so we're going to pull out certain aspects of this podcast, why it was successful. I also have some of the YouTube stats a little bit later that I'll show you that I think are pretty interesting. But this has been a success on the podcast platforms. That's the main kind of place where, this podcast has thrived. And as we mentioned before in the monetization LaunchPad, if you didn't see that, that is also in the school. You can go and grab that. We went through the 4 stages of podcast monetization or 4 types of monetization, right? In this case, they were focused on the sales side, which is going to be the most relevant. Also, we are the most bullish on. Also, this is essentially what we teach, which is using the podcast to help you generate more revenue and or add an aspect of your marketing that is not already being accomplished with other forms of marketing. So Wealth Warehouse is basically the number one example we have for this type of podcast, which is sell your own service off the podcast. And we're actually going to have Dave, the host of the podcast, talk to us a little bit about that too. So, just to cover this once more, which if you didn't get into the monetization workshop, the pros of selling your own services are you don't have to sell anything else. If you're going to monetize your podcast by selling guest spots, if you're going to monetize your podcast by selling sponsorships, everybody thinks they want to do that until a company is asking you not to put out this episode or to put out this episode or to have their friend on just because they're paying you $2,000 a month. I have reached out to Wealth Warehouse probably no less than 3 times already asking them if they're interested in sponsorship, and every single time they say no, because they do not want any dilution of their core message. And also, they don't need it. They don't need the money. So there's a lot of cons and downsides to monetizing your podcast beyond selling your own services. And, we went into that last workshop, but just to kind of cover this briefly one more time, we're going to mainly be focusing on this, especially when it comes to Wealth Warehouse, and their success is directly from that. We'll also get into how many clients, et cetera, that they've gotten from the podcast. But yeah, so the first thing that we want to go through is, the 5 kind of pillars of this podcast. So like how was this successful? So like reverse engineering the success of the podcast. And then I'll have Dave come on a little bit later, as a snippet of our episode, so he can talk through it from personal experience. But the first thing here is a niche within a niche, right? So their first niche, I would say the overarching niche is insurance. Then within insurance, you have life insurance. And then within life insurance, you have this concept called infinite banking. So the more specific you go, the easier it is. Not only is it easier for the listener, but it's also easier for you to create the content. And we did this, Andrew, we did this with our topics when it comes to creating a 3-step video. And then each of those steps is its own video. And then each of those videos, there's 3 steps. And it's basically, for lack of a better word, stepception, basically, as you continue to go. So I think a lot of times people will see even a podcast like this. They'll look at 100,000 downloads and go, oh, I need to reach 100,000 people. I will tell you one thing. The one thing that Dave and Paul do not care about is the downloads. I could text them right now and tell them congrats on 100,000 downloads, and they will say, oh, awesome, thanks. I didn't even know. They do not log in. They do not look at the numbers ever, at all. So and that's because of these steps here. Also, they don't need to do that. They do have sequences and kind of soft funnels set up to capture. And I'll go through kind of their sales process and how it relates to the podcast. But yeah, first and foremost, niche within the niche. So think about it. If it's podcasting, if it's lead gen, if it's LinkedIn video, what's the niche within LinkedIn video niche, right? And does that mean you might get 200 views instead of 20,000? 100%. Yeah. But are those 200 views, and I know most of us do get more than that, but it's about the type of people and are the right people watching the video. So on top of niche within a niche, they also have extreme consistency. I'm not going to belabor this point, guys. 1 episode a week, never took a week off, 144 episodes, all you really got to know. If you just want if you want a side-by-side case study, this is Wealth Warehouse continuing not only to promote, like it says here, but just continuing to release. In the same exact year we launched Wealth Science, I think he ended up stopping maybe at like 50 episodes. He was cresting the momentum mark at 50 episodes with Wealth Science. So we launched Wealth Science and Wealth Warehouse in the exact same year. Wealth Science was real estate investing. Wealth Warehouse was infinite banking. It's just, that's just it. It's just a downward slope, man. So this is just what happens. If Jesse, shout out to Jesse Fuchsia, he's a beast. If he just kept going with his podcast and did nothing else except for LinkedIn, I think my intuition is he would be at 100,000 downloads right now too. But he decided to stop, which for personal reasons or whatever that might be. So that's it. Stick to it. Don't stop if you can avoid it. On top of the basics, guys, what niche within a niche? Extreme consistency. These are the more obvious ones. The less obvious ones are, there's an angle here. There's not only a political, but a psychological angle. And Jack, I don't know if you want to jump in on this in terms of like, I know it's not necessarily a political angle, but just kind of the overarching theme of Wealth Warehouse and how that kind of contributes to their, kind of target market or who they're specifically talking to.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly thorny listening to them if you're not in this vein of military law enforcement a little bit more, if you're stateside, a little bit more right-leaning, conservative, for better or for worse. They let people know who they are. And you'll see a lot, especially on LinkedIn, where there's so much camouflage and everyone is trying to say the right thing, and it's not a bad instinct to follow because you don't want to have, especially if we're all in the boat that most of us are in, where your bottom line is affected by your marketing, which is your content, which is the stuff that you say. You don't want to be controversial for controversy's sake, especially if it's something that you don't really have a ton of conviction behind. So I'll couch this by saying this doesn't mean to seek out some sort of political stance or etch out some sort of goalposts, and that exclusivity is going to create some positive flow. It's more advice to not shy away from it if it is A, part of your content, or B, a big part of what you want your personal brand and your depiction of your your digital self, whatever, if you want that to be part of it. So we use the wealth warehouse example because it's the clearest one that we can see, at least with the clients that we work with, of them just unabashedly. I mean, some of you guys would listen to their podcast and you'd roll your eyes at some of their takes, or even probably turn it off. And they're looking for that. They're seeking that out. Not only is that driving that consistency of weekly listeners, they're gathering, a small tribe of diehards of people that are coming back because they agree with what they're saying. It's refreshing. So there's something there with that, whether you want to dig into it or not. There definitely are some consequences. There could be some blowback. It's not just going to be people saying, I agree with you, brother. You're great. There's going to be some people that are going to be turned off by it. We have another client too that said, look, when I launched this podcast, at the top of it, I want to say that, Christ is king, and I'm a devout Catholic, and he wants to do this big thing at the beginning of that. There are going to be some people that will say in the beginning when they watch that, I will never watch this guy again. I don't want to do business with him. And not because they worship Satan, because they're turned off by the over, whatever you'd want to call it, right? The religion, people that are too religious. There's other people that say, this is my guy. Finally, thank God, literally, that somebody is out here and they're espousing these beliefs, and they're not scared to share it with others. So that's just kind of a long-winded way to demonstrate that push-pull with it, with that political or psychological angle. But all of this you could distill down to be like, just have an opinion, because even that is going to differentiate you a ton, because there's just a lot of, I think what Ryan refers to as vanillaism of people just saying, stuff that they know people will agree with, but it's not refreshing, it's not new, it's not novel, it's not unique. So yeah, that's something that can be worth a lot or a little, depending on what content you guys specifically have going on.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great, fantastic analysis. Also, you want to look at what stage in your career are you in, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh my God.
let's
Yeah, you
take
make
that
sure
into account, guys.
yeah,
They can
that's a
lose a
great point.
client and they're still ultra successful. So, meaning, or lose a
Yeah.
prospect, right? Because of this. And I relate this to this guy. You can Google him. It's called NJ Truck King or NJ Car King. You can look him up on Google. This is a guy who literally repaints, spends tens of thousands of dollars repainting cars just to put like Trump signs on the cars and then post them on his social media with 1 million followers. This guy sells cars. He sells high-end cars. He doesn't care. He does not. He wants the comments. He wants the I'll never buy a car from you again. He loves that. Guess what? He's a millionaire. Who cares, right? So there's ways to do this where that guy is, I've never seen anybody do it more than him. And then you have this, which is, there's extremes to this, obviously. Even Wealth Warehouse is, for content, is not obviously not the extreme. To wrap up this point, it's really, where's your cultural angle? I help founders create, video content for LinkedIn, or I help people automate their podcasts, or I help founders automate their, processes, etc. Or I help people create podcast SEO or SEO for their business. Great, that's the what. But is there a cultural angle that you can attach to it? And if you go through all your content, you'll probably notice what it is. You might not even know. And like what Jack is saying, it's not going to blow up your stuff. If you want to get a lot of hate, if you want to get more haters, okay, yeah, make it more political. It's pretty obvious. But this is not a strategy that is do just copy this formula and then now you got 100,000 downloads. It's more like, can I add a little bit more nuance, and maybe just lean in? I mean, listen, guys, we're talking personal brand here. It is personal, right? So
Yeah, really the personal brand part of it is just showing more who you are.
yeah,
I think there's so many
yeah,
people
not
that have
not making stuff up, like not making new stuff. It's more so just bringing out the right pieces of your personality, or the just enough of your personality, I'll say.
absolutely.
Yeah,
There's a level of decorum that gets sort of nauseating to and especially like LinkedIn, sort of like B2B, like businessy content. There, if you can just be a person that's a little bit more fun, that's already going to pay off dividends. I'll say this too with Wealth Warehouse. They have a political angle that's built into it. That whole infinite banking financial idea rests on a certain level of conspiracy. You have to have a certain level of government oversight of all this other stuff. So they kind of have to stake out a position, and they're fine doing that. If you guys don't have a ready political angle, this isn't us saying like you need to find some sort of cultural angle or something that's going to be a battleground and pick that spot. If you're, because I'm thinking about somebody like you, Jared, where you're just like, I just want to automate stuff. Like, there's no way they would. I would say
yeah,
then we're talking about your personality and you being who you are and less presentational. Not that that's any aspect of the content that you have, but that's going to be your differentiator. Is like, look, just don't be boring, because there's so many people that if they do get on video, which is a gigantic obstacle, half the time, right? Just shooting from the hip, they're probably going to be a little bit dry. And, they're dealing with content or stuff that's a little bit dry. So
yep.
if you could do that, if you don't have a ready cultural angle or whatever, then that makes sense too. Just so you guys don't think that we're just, because Wealth Warehouse is like one of our most militant podcasts, and it
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense where they can kind of cut their teeth with this stuff, So sometimes you're like, well, I don't know, I don't really have anything to fight about. Then just be who you are, just being more, differentiating with your personality, just to cap that off.
And let me ask you guys: do you guys consciously think about putting things into the content that aren't directly related necessarily to your tactics? Like, is that a thought that goes in? Because I have a little anecdote for it, but Jared, run it.
Before no, now I am because I don't know. I think I enjoy like I kind of like think of the perspective like what content do I enjoy, and I like when persons like give me insights into like their perspectives or like why they're doing things, and like it gives me a reason to come back for that person. I guess we kind of all know the whole personal branding thing, but I think for me, I'm actively trying to do it more because that's what I enjoy
Yeah.
to watch.
I'm starting to do it a little bit more on the shorts I create for my personal brand account on Instagram, but not necessarily within the podcast interviews.
So yeah, platform specific, and it's
Yeah,
easier to do it in a one-off video
right.
if you are going to do it. Yeah, totally. I'm with that. All right. Well, we got a couple more to go.
Yeah, there's another way.
Go for it, dude.
Um, no, there's a couple of people that do this really well, right? And there's a few different ways to do this, but one of the things that like I've seen and these guys that I worked with they do like Instagram stuff, and they said to like um think of your content or whatever, or your Instagram page as like your own TV station, right? And when you look at and when you equate your Instagram page to a TV station, basically like what you're doing is like you're like the stuff that hits your main feed, right? Like that's like your prime time content, like 8 o'clock at night when everybody's watching TV, right? Um, and then they say that your kind of like reels or whatever, your quick hits, like that's like commercials. You like literally, it's like making a commercial for your business. And then stories, like Instagram stories, is like reality TV. And that is the best place for you to share these kind of like things that you wouldn't necessarily put on your feed, right? Like you wouldn't necessarily share this stuff on your feed, but because it disappears in 24 hours and it's not like like that's where you kind of show more of your personality and do more of the behind the scenes stuff, right? And I've seen other people kind of do this, like a similar thing on LinkedIn. Obviously, LinkedIn doesn't have stories, but they kind of do it in the comments. Like they'll use like, I've done this too, like where, if I'm on vacation or something like that, like I'll put vacation pics or things that, Halloween pics or things that I'm doing like with my family or something like that. I won't make a post about it, but I'll stick it in the comments.
Yep.
So that people are, some people are still seeing it and reacting to it and getting that kind of behind the scenes to build that personal connection. But not having it live on the main kind of feed. So how you would execute that in a podcast, maybe a little bit, obviously be a little bit different. Maybe it's in the opening, couple minutes, or maybe it's in the closing couple minutes, just what's going on. Like, I would say probably better suited in the closing couple of minutes or something like that, because, those are like when your diehards are still going to be around anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just
No, I
kind of
love it. I mean,
trying to
it's
figure out how to
knowing,
equate it to podcasting.
yeah, well, it's knowing what you're doing, where you're doing it. So, and it's all, again, I mean, what you just said, Danny, is strategy, right? That's why we start with that, right? Because it's like, then right? If you go to Dave or Paul's Facebook, they may have fully blown, I don't know, by the way, don't quote me, but they might have fully blown political posts because today's election day. They're not going to go on their podcast and have a Trump only episode, right? Because they'll have their Trump only episode just in case. Imagine they are for Trump.
Yeah, it's not
On their
heavy. It's just
Facebook. Yeah.
little comments.
Yeah.
You'll
You posting on Facebook is one thing. Your
After three
podcast is
episodes, you'll know. Yeah, it's
yeah.
not really anything super heavy-handed. Just to
No,
add that little.
but to what you said, Danny, what you would do is have, and people ask us this all the time. I think there's, I don't think this matters as much as people think it does, which is having episodes that are more personal episodes. Like, just say in the title, like, my thoughts on this or whatever. Have it be a segment or a certain edition. There are diehards of, every one of us here, if you create content, that it may be 5 of them, it may be 50, it may be 500 of them who weirdly or not, Danny, are curious about your personal life. And so, you may have an episode on that, and Jack and I will do it in our co-hosted episodes where we'll kind of go off track a little bit and create a couple moments that we may not post as clips because we just went off on some movie reference for 3 minutes. Some people love that shit, right? So it is, to your point, Danny, about what and where. I think as long as it's in there somewhere, I mean, this is Jason Vanna stuff, which, by the way, guys, he is going to come on and do a workshop for us about positioning. But this is kind of getting into positioning / differentiation. But also, where do you place that, and how do you make sure you're not hitting the gas too hard on one or the brakes too hard on the other?
Yeah, it's funny. On the last podcast I did, which like I stopped doing it because it just like wasn't like what I wanted it to be ultimately. But I did like every episode there was a lot of interview episodes, and I was doing solo episodes too. But like the general like kind of theme it got into was like parenting, like it was like a dad podcast sort of, right? And I did this one episode about why I quit playing fantasy football. That episode did better than any fucking episode that I put out on that entire show.
Yep.
I don't know, and all it was me like talking for 10 minutes about why I quit playing fantasy football. And, there was a good part of it that was definitely like a rant, right? Just about how I hate the NFL and all their kind of like bullshit that they put people through.
It's rigged, so yeah.
And sure enough, like that
No problem, Jeff.
episode did the best of all the episodes in that entire podcast, and it was completely like unrelated to most of the other stuff that was going on.
Yeah, man. No, and I saw that on my show too, or even Instagram, especially. I know we talk about Instagram a lot. That's a platform where it's really easy to do this because you can just, I mean, TikTok too, obviously, but I would have these videos of me walking down the street just talking. That would get 10,000 views. I would spend 5 hours editing a podcast clip that would get 5,000. And I'm like, shit, should I just walk down the street and talk? Obviously, they serve different purposes. But to your point, Danny, and also to John Mayer's point that I always go back to is the audience is always right. They're always going to tell you. They're always going to tell you what the better content is, right? So, and I actually have a few examples of that for Wealth Warehouse too. But this is why we're here, guys. This is what I want to talk about. This is the stuff that when you're sitting there alone making the content, you can't have this conversation right then and there in the moment. So, and we're always trying to find that balance. So here, I'll get back to it for you, but
Yeah, and I'll just add one last thing too, is that, it is funny that we're starting to have a lot more time that we've spent sort of in the room with social media and how it affects just, each one of us personally, not getting too much into a hippie conversation about how it impacts society, right? But like, I feel a lot of the times that people go into social media is very selfish or masochistic reasons where they're either going on to find something, solve a problem, right? The stuff that we deal with LinkedIn, where helping people become problem aware, solving something that they want to solve, or they go on to almost make themselves upset on purpose. And you see a lot of that with TikTok, with the stuff that it serves up, or Instagram. And these are platforms that none of us are really super, super involved in, and we all kind of know what goes on there, right? It's not so much LinkedIn, but that stuff like with the fantasy football that you brought up, Danny, it's probably because like there's like meat there that people can either like disagree with it or they understand where you're coming from and they're like, yeah, I want my Sunday back. Like there's so many times that fantasy football is like ruined a day of my week, and it's the one of it is a weekend day, so that it sucks. Like you actually look at the expense, and then if you pay money to get in, it's a whole thing.
and then
But there's more meat to
yeah,
dig into that. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like, even if it's like negative, it's like, I
yeah,
feel like people, I don't know. I can't, I don't have any numbers or data or anything I can point to prove it, but I feel like a lot of people's engagement is just not very positive with social media. They don't want to see like a Gary Vaynerchuk and be like, just be inspired. Just go out there and create. Like, I just don't think people want to see that. I think they want to disagree with something. They
yep.
want, you know what I mean? They want to get some sort of information to solve something in their real life. I feel like a lot of it isn't the stuff you see like on LinkedIn that people's first instinct is like, well, interview somebody that's cool and inspiring, and then people
Yep.
will think this person's cool and they'll be inspired
Well,
by that.
that's
And
the
it's like,
problem, Jack, with LinkedIn is we're on an island. And so once you expand, you have this idea because you may have been in LinkedIn pool. Once you expand to the ponds, lakes, and oceans of other social media platforms, you realize like, oh yeah, they don't need. I don't even know the name of this entrepreneur. Like I don't even know this entrepreneur. How the hell why am I gonna sit down for 45 minutes and try to be inspired by somebody who owns a garbage company in Wisconsin who I don't know, you know?
yeah, we have a client that we do TikTok stuff from, and it's so funny seeing the engagement of a clip that we use, the same exact clip on the same day that you used on LinkedIn and that you used on TikTok, and the level and the quality of engagement that you see on TikTok versus LinkedIn. I mean, obviously isn't insane, but like it really is insane. Like it's just, you kind of wonder what the hell, well, you can get crazy views on TikTok. Look at this one example of a drywall company that got a $50,000 contract because somebody, I think even today, Sully, didn't you even see one? There was one about Chili's where it was like, Chili's has, it's just a video of a woman, but I'm like, that's Chili's. It's not the average person on TikTok. The average
Yeah,
small
yeah.
business on, like, they aren't getting. Yeah, so that stuff, it definitely, you see what it yields, and TikTok, it could be cool to be like, wow, like I got like 20,000 views off of this one short or this one not short, but this one TikTok. And it's like, but what? 20,000 eyeballs connected to what? People that never buy anything or advance because a lot of us we do edutainment stuff. We're not like reviewing movies or video games or anything that people super interested in for
Yeah,
their free time, which is okay. I
yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
it's what we do
I mean,
to
all of
make
what we do
money.
is an add-on. Investing
Yeah,
is an
yeah,
add-on.
true.
Video
Exactly.
content is an add-on. Podcast is an add-on. SEO is an add-on. They're all add-ons. I have a business, I have clients, I have a service. Now let me add this other stuff on to my marketing, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's why it's better. That's why Wealth Warehouse is successful because it's just like you literally need to believe this philosophy. Now we're good. And it's just little pool of people who all believe in this philosophy. It's not viral. Never will be. Maybe 50 years from now. But and to the next point here, I mean, it blends perfectly, which is especially if, and you don't need to be political, You definitely do need to understand the psychological side. But if you don't want to do that, you can have the philosophical angle, which is more so like if then statements or just the belief. What is the belief behind this? You know, is podcast principles belief that the founder should be the founder and not be a content creator and just sit on a podcast 30 minutes a week and then that's it. Let everybody else do the content, the rest of the content for them. Well, there's a type of founder who likes that, and there's a type of founder who doesn't like that. And I'm not saying that is our belief, but it is. If it is, then I have to find a way to bake it in. And that would be mixing the philosophical with, hey, I'm the founder that only wants to spend 2 hours a month on content because I have 7 businesses. Now, how do I do that? How do I set up the team? Okay, boom, there's the tactical. And Wealth Warehouse does a pretty good job of blending those two. And I think this was the moment that I wanted to share with you guys now that I'm here. So let me know if you can hear this, and then we'll run it.
Both, but
that's
certainly
that's another metric.
Worthwhile.
Another metric you could calculate: how many clients would it take to pay for this service, right? And for us, I mean, it could easily be one client. One good client pays for the full year, and then some. You know, and now we get clients consistently, prospects consistently that become clients. And then to start sharing. And what's cool is our clients are probably the most loyal listeners because we're giving them more information. We're bringing our clients along. So now it's a better client experience because they'll send us a question. I'll say, you know what? Paul and I are going to talk about that on our next recording. Thanks for the idea. We're going to do a recording. Stand by. You'll get the answer in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And there they go.
And I would say, Ryan, that, you know, for people looking to start a podcast for whatever they're trying to do, is that, you know, our case, it's, I guess, in the sales realm, right? So the listeners that become clients are ideal clients. They take very little effort on our part to further educate because they've listened to episodes 1 through 50 or 1 through 100 now, whatever. And they just have some, you know, they have some clarification questions or mechanical questions or something on how stuff works. But by and large, they are low maintenance, ready to rock.
And that's what I wanted to do here for a second is just zoom out, just so we kind of refresh ourselves on why the hell are we even doing this? That's why. If it is not contributing to educating prospects, I mean, every single one of us gives away the sauce, right? We all believe in that, whether we're giving it away yet or we're prepping to give it away. Like Andrew's creating videos, Jared's redoing his angle in his podcast. All of this is contributing to spending less time with prospects. Okay, so that's what Dave is about to say. I won't play more of it, but Dave's about to come in and just say he doesn't have the time. He would rather have them listen to the podcast than take the 30 minutes to ask him the same exact questions. And obviously some people want to bend your ear. Obviously some people want to quote unquote waste your time. But the modern buyer, for most of what we're selling, especially with doctors, founders, CEOs, salespeople, etc., they would rather drive in the car and listen to something, and they're not looking at that as, well, this guy's brushing me off. He just wants me to listen to his podcast instead of talking to him. Most of these people are intelligent enough to understand that none of us are trying to waste time. And we all know this. We've all taken clients before, so we understand. The ones that are trying to bend our time are the ones that have the most time, and the ones that have the most time have the least amount of money, right? So we're trying to, by creating this content that does educate prospects, then clients, you're not only creating this philosophical side, this belief system that they fall under, but you're also one-to-one attracting only ideal prospects and clients. And that's why I've taken one discovery call in the last maybe month or so. And it's great. I love it. I'm spending more time with you guys, which is what I want to do. I want to be on the LaunchPad. I want to be educating. I want to be out there just having these conversations. I could have 5 discovery calls in a day, but instead, if somebody's going to be turned off by me sending them a resource, then they're not ideal. They're not ideal. Or my resource sucks, and in that case, we have to figure that out. But either way, it's still giving you pretty clear insight into the prospect and client journey, which ultimately, to keep us zoomed out here, that's what we're doing. Why the hell else would we do this? Because we're not starting a podcast to get 1 million views. And if it gets 1 million, great. You guys won't need to be here. Then you have to get sponsors, and then maybe you'll come back and be like, man, this sponsor wants me to have both, this person who I don't know. So you guys can see a little bit deeper into the results. This is the YouTube channel. 900 subs. In the last 30 days, 1,000 views. This is on videos, not the shorts, but that's it. I mean, I could show you the comment sections. It's just people being like, it's just people asking questions. I mean, I can show you right now. This is their comment section.
It's either people asking questions or they're mad.
Or they're mad. Or they're like, read the Bible, brother. And I'm like, what?
And again, that's built into the fact that they're talking about financial stuff because it's people's money, right? Where you put your money, how you manage your money, it's sort of like your religion or your politics. It can become part of people's identity. That's why they'll seek out to this stuff to like attack it, which can get you the views. But more specifically, we're launching up a flare for prospects, for people to come in that agree with our way of life, whatever it may be, our services, our advice for whatever, thing that we're working on with them. That's what we're kind of doing, is just shooting up that flare. And they get tons of people that are like, you guys are the 2 biggest dumbasses I've ever seen. And they'll eat those comments because they're looking for the people that say, yeah, I've been looking for 2 guys to sort of softly berate me about how bad I've been managing my money. And it sounds niche, but again, there's people out there that they find them and they connect with them. And like David Paul said, they're connected at the hip. But all of this can be generated from just having an opinion. Like, this doesn't need to be financial services. This doesn't need to be talking about healthcare or politics or anything that has really, really strong stuff. If you have a captive audience, or you have an audience that's interested for Jared for automation or for short form content for podcasting, you can have strong opinions within those niches that's going to get a little bit more engagement out of that. And it shows people that you have a pulse. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, man. I mean,
no other way to put it, but it's like, are you aware? Like, do you have a stance on anything? Or are you just like, well, you should have the episode title should be like, or do you have like, no, this guy says this.
Jack, all you got to do is look at our competition. Look at Podcast Principles, direct competition, and look at the posts. Some of them may even get good engagement, which normally they don't, but this is not a jab at them. It's just to look at the reality, which is top 5 episode, podcast. I mean, I don't know how to launch a podcast in 5 steps or whatever. There's just no meat. There's no spice to it, right? It's just plain chicken. And also on that note too, guess what Wealth Warehouse's some of their most successful videos or shorts is going to be? It's going to be taking that hate comment and going, this guy's a freaking idiot. Here's why. And now
they have
created
episodes where they literally
have full episodes.
They get so petty, guys. And I'm not even expressly advising this, but they have, I think, like 2 episodes where they address, and I love when people that don't have haters address haters. Like, you don't have a hater. Like, you're not like a
no. It's just like it's a lizard brain comment reaction.
But just real quick, they like went through and they like addressed them, and they didn't like attack them like mean or anything like that. But they went head on into it. So there is some import there for the most part.
100%. And that you should do that. So I guess that I have it. Oh yeah. So this is the other thing that I had. So this workshop was born out of, number one, because they just had 100,000 downloads, which I thought was notable. But also, I wanted people to see what Jack calls Titlecraft, brilliantly, which is basically just obviously just crafting your titles, but in a very specific way. These guys have done a great job of that. And again, I partially am not sure if they even knew, but they're very creative with their titles. So I made a video that was top 9 titles for 99,000 downloads, which will end up coming out. You guys just got the sauce today. This is the actual but exploded. But I do have a doc in the workshop with their top 9 titles. And these are all titles of episodes that got over 1,000 views. 1,000 downloads. Also, something to think about is these are titles, for the most part, that people clicked on once they were already bought in. So that's something that you can think about, which is, all right, great. Now I have my audience. Now there's people going, hey, I actually really like your stuff, but they're not going to know who. There's only what I'd say on any given average podcast, maybe 25 to 50 people who may listen to every single episode religiously. So you can look at these title variations as legit examples of attracting the majority of the audience. And, partially accompanying our point before, right? Real world examples of this, using X to eliminate Y. Why a type of people love video content, etc. So it's not just your kind of 7 tips. Instead of, in this case, like what we said, 7 invalid things you can do or objections, 7 invalid whole life insurance objections, 7 video content objections, right? Breaking down 7 reasons why these people are wrong about video content or SEO or whatever it might be, or investing, etc. So you guys can go ahead and grab these. I did the top 9 from 99,000 downloads. So that was a variation on one of the titles, but that's there in the workshop as well. So yeah, I also am logged into the back end of their YouTube, and I'm logged into their Captivate account. So I have access to all the data. But overall, comments, questions, anything you guys want to see when it comes to Wealth Warehouse?
I just want to see the numbers, or I see the numbers, but how I'm still on the wave of getting, I get all hot and bothered when I see that I get like 2,000 views on an Instagram reel, but it's so impressive. I'm seeing they're posting, they're getting like 23 views, 10 views, like across their video posts.
Yep.
So how, like, I'm just like, as someone from the outside, and I'm sure even a potential prospect on my end would be like, how are these people getting these amount of views and this success with such, little eyeball count on their operation?
Yeah, so they're definitely automating a lot of their social marketing. I don't think either of them are very, very heavy on any one social platform, maybe Facebook.
Right.
Yeah, this is such an add-on for them. It's like they're already they almost really don't even want more clients. So they're very like removed from that number one.
Yeah,
like they didn't even really need this boost.
No, I go to them with things, and the only thing they're interested in is merch from the podcast. But like, there's think about it, like from an average client of ours, like we're helping them generate more money, then they can do more things, right? In this case, It's less. How can we just do less or the same amount, right? But if you want the real sauce, like how it really happened, it's a mix of luck, timing, personality types, podcast style, podcast market and landscape, meaning the other infinite banking podcasts in that niche were very okay. Flip to chapter 34 in Nelson Nash's book, How to Become Your Own Banker. Chapter 34, page 3 says, I'm not even joking. That was the actual, was a competitor to their podcast. But there were other podcasts out there like that, which in the episode they do talk about that. But really it's the mix of podcast SEO, luck, timing, co-host, personalities. This started on social media. No doubt. We did a full social media strategy with them for LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatever they had. So friends and family. But beyond that, YouTube is a big driver. Because if I go into the stats, a couple of the videos have 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 views. So a lot of those got YouTube and Google SEO, right? So it's been a little bit of everything for that for this show. And yes, their shorts do get 23 views. And maybe 1 or 2 comments, but they don't even look at that. They don't even look at the views.
Right.
They never even log in. So,
no, that's dope. And I saw their company. When they came to you, did they already have a web? They didn't have a name for their podcast. They didn't have a domain or a website yet for it either, did they?
They had a website for their business, but they still to this day don't have a website for the podcast. It's just embedded in the website for their business, which is maybe the IBC guys, or what is it? Something Capital, right, Jack? Something.
No, they have a website.
They're
Warehouse. Is that them? Yeah, that's them.
Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
See,
so like I think really what it boils down to, Andrew, is like there's like a couple like main like boilerplate stuff. I think definitely the co-hosting thing that Ryan mentioned helps for the content and for the consistency. Piggybacking off that, the consistency definitely helps. You see so many podcasts where they can be operational for 3 or 4 months and you don't know if they'd ever achieve these numbers, or you don't know if it would break in the fifth month and they get 2 clients from it, and then suddenly the entire operation, the entire marketing activity is worth it. Right. So I think the consistency is the biggest factor. There are some built-in stuff, and I know I've been kind of pumping the brakes a lot with these guys. There are some built-in stuff. I mean, like, the community that they're reaching out to. I mean, once these guys have their financial advisor, in so far as infinite banking, they're kind of with you for life. So there is that, where once you collect these people, you blink and have 2 3 years pass, and suddenly 5 people turn into 15 to 16 to 17, and suddenly 50 60 70, and they're watching every week, and those numbers start to appreciate. What it really boils down to is the objective. So if you have a client that comes to you, Andrew, and says, "Hey, it's what Ryan alluded to before. I just started this company. I'm looking to get my name out there. I'm looking to really pepper my network with not only like my value, obviously, but what services am I providing? What's my personality? I need to get my personal brand launched, right? That's where I think maybe more of the viewership metrics would be not quite as important, but a little bit more important. It's not that you ignore the data, but like you have to understand where you're at. There's so many podcasters, and I feel bad for them that they're on like a desert planet and their objective is to fill like an Olympic swimming pool with water. It doesn't need to be their objective. They just need to fill a bird bath. You just need to get 2 people that love you and pay money for your services, and suddenly the podcast is justified and we're on cloud nine. When we don't have those 2 clients, or that 1 client, or however many it is to justify its existence, everyone goes back to virality. Can I get 2,000? Wow, 2,000 views. Wow, I must be. But there's too many inputs to try to understand what would make that 2,000.
Right.
There's some broad strokes that we can understand, but there's too many inputs to replicate that to every single time.
Exactly.
I think it's a lot cleaner that if you go into it saying like, look, I'm helping out people with purple eyes that ride dragons on Venus, and they're looking to buy real estate in Virginia. Like, it's a small group that we're looking at. We should be ready for small numbers and look at the quality of those engagements rather than the. But people forget about that all the time. That blows my mind. And not to protect
Yeah.
my own ass, if things don't take, only
Yeah.
60. Well, I mean, look who we're talking to. People who ride dragons on Venus, right? So there is that thing where it's like it depends on your objective. So Andrew, if they're starting out and they're looking to make a big splash, the viewership, of course, but if it's something more niche, we should kind of buckle up for the first year being a little bit
Yeah.
not splashy. You know what I mean? Especially for YouTube or Captivate or whatnot. I'd look at LinkedIn, what are the comments like? Do you get emails? Does somebody ever approach you and want to work with you just from the podcast? Harder metrics to collect, but more valuable.
Got you. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank
And
you.
and
I
there's
think
a
I solved it, Ryan.
there's a yeah, I mean that was it.
There
We
you go.
need no other explanation. But there's a
Wrap up.
kind of like a 3D chess here that's being played, which is even, and listen, I love these guys. Obviously, I have to caveat, which I love Anthony. Get more listeners, podcast SEO folks. Um, and the numbers are real, right? And they're saying, hey, look at all these people that are buying because we, dumped 10 or 20 grand into podcast SEO, and now, we've made that back. Great. But I also know of podcasts that do have downloads in the thousands and nobody buys anything because these are people who are listening to podcasts, not buying.
Right.
So there's a mental masturbation that can happen where people are just listening to podcasts and they just keep listening to the podcast, but they're not going to buy anything. So it also doesn't mean that since they are a listener, or that even though you have 10,000 listeners, I know people who had same exact listeners with Warehouse who stopped because they thought they weren't successful. It's not because they thought they weren't successful for their own arbitrary reasons, because so you can have a successful podcast and it doesn't mean it even makes sense to keep going. So it's all, I mean, listen, where we stand. We stand on the right audience only. If it's 7 people for the rest of my life, then great, I'm good on that. We're not going to serve 10,000 clients. It just is not this business. We're not selling protein bars. And I've sold protein bars, so I know what it's like. I know what that B2C world is like. Literally look up IQ Bar, shout out to
So
Will Mincy.
brutal.
Yeah, I worked
So
at
brutal.
Costco. Worked at Costco selling protein bars. I hate that. I don't want to say, hate's a strong word, obviously, but for me personally, that model sucks. It's just so much variation. So even the get more listeners, I'll get your podcast up to thousands of downloads a month. We wouldn't say it works for everybody. I mean, they would probably say it wouldn't even make sense for everybody if you really had to sit them down at a bar and you'd have a few drinks and they might say, hey man, like, yeah, you can have a successful podcast with 1,000 downloads,
Yeah, I feel that.
It's telling when you see that a lot, though, if you have any sort of adjacent sort of whatever to podcasting or video content or whatever, you'll get somebody in your DMs that'll connect with you and say, I can get your podcast up to 10. It's not just stupid, right? They're not just wasting it. There is a market for that. Same as when somebody calls up and they're telemarketing for your car's extended. This is so dumb. Morons, tons of morons are like,
Yeah.
oh, really? My warranty's up? Let me check that out. It's the same thing with the podcast, and that's my barometer for does that still exist? Is do I still get those DMs in my LinkedIn?
Yeah.
And I do. They're like, just give me the name of your podcast, and I can get 10,000 downloads for you in a month. And it's like they have structured this offer because there are people that are like, so you can get me 10,000 downloads in a month. Like there are people that are hard up for those vanity metrics. And then it's just what do you do with it? If they're even real people. But yeah, it's
final note.
I get it. I understand. It feels good. Like I'm not denying that.
God.
I'm not like if you have something that hits, I mean, even for our done for you clients, I'll have a TikTok. There's been a million times I'll text Ron and be like, you see the TikTok today?
How you doing?
7,000 views in under an hour. But I don't know what the hell I did. I'm a chimp at a typewriter in terms of what made that go for the first hour compared to the last 50 posts or something like that. So I get that. I'm not immune to it at all. It's just we need to learn to to scale it back, and be better friends to ourselves, I guess. What are we trying to achieve?
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, you got for your F1 example, Andrew, it's like if there's two guys talking about the last race and there's 17 podcasts with two guys drinking a beer talking about the last race, it's over. I hate to say it, but it's like you're going to reach your 100 people and that's going to be it, and unfortunately, or maybe not. Or maybe you have a viral TikTok and you break through and now you're the number one F1 podcast of two guys drinking a beer and talking about the last race. But
the thing though is that usually doesn't carry over, right?
Yeah.
If you break into it once and then do you continue that? Because that's the thing, those bigger accounts, they keep scooping up those views. And if it's just a lottery sort of fluke thing. You can't really build.
And I found this,
it,
I mean, listen, I did this before, and not that I know the extent, right? Like if I ever go back to a music podcast, I know what my metrics for success are going to be. It's so easy. But with Bobcast, reaching 50, 100,000 views on a clip, yeah, great. 10,000 downloads, hundreds of thousands of views, couple celebrities, cool. That was success. Great. Didn't have 100,000 downloads,
Right.
Probably was never going to get there with a local, in that case, a local podcast, but
Barack Obama still didn't email us back, but
yeah, we're working on
keep that invitation open.
Yeah. Now he actually might hit us back now.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens in the next 2 days.
100 in county vote.
By the way, vote Tony Soprano. All right, I'll let you guys get out of here.
Love it.
Ronnie Coleman. Vote Ronnie Coleman. Anything else? Closing.
Hey guys, thanks for bearing with us.
Thank you.
I know both.
Hope
Brian
this
and I
was this informative at all?
Lecture assaulting
Was this a full complete waste of time, or did you want something from this?
Yeah.
No, it's cool.
So we got Jason Vanna coming at end of this month or early December. Also want Spencer Carpenter to come for podcast guesting. In the meantime, I will give you guys my strategy. Been on over 100 podcasts as a guest. Most of it is people who came to me. So I'm gonna hit you guys with that strategy too. And then as I mentioned on the email, also in the LaunchPad group, any topic suggestions, if you see anything else our clients do and you want it broken down, hit me. We'll turn it into a Launchpad workshop. And on that note, let you guys go. See you
Yeah,
Thursday.
that could be fun. So let us know, guys.
Yeah, and we'll be on Thursday. So Q&A. Let's run it. Let's rock. Let's roll.